At my daughter's wedding, the groom raised his champagne glass, looked me dead in the eye, and said into the microphone, "Dan, hand over the keys, house, barn, tractor. Family's consolidating." 200 people laughed like it was a punchline. But I knew it wasn't. He wanted my farm, and he wanted it publicly. My daughter Emily froze beside him, her smile flickering like a candle in a draft. For half a second, her eyes found mine, wide and pleading, like she knew what he was doing but couldn't stop it. And me? I felt the brass keys in my pocket dig into my thigh like a brand. That farm wasn't just dirt and boards, it was 40 years of my back, my pension, and my promise to Linda, my late wife, that I'd pass it down clean. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The laughter died when I didn't move. The DJ's mic squealed and went silent. The only sound was the oven timer dinging from the caterer's tent. My neighbor Walt leaned toward me and muttered, "Don't you dare." And I almost did. That's the truth. For a split second, with 200 faces on me, I thought about sparing the scene, pulling those keys out, and letting him win. But shame is heavier than metal. My hand stayed in my pocket. I forced a toast, mumbled about new beginnings, and sat down. Every bite of carrot cake tasted like sawdust after that. Later, by the bar, I found a crumpled catering slip left on the counter. A bold red number leapt off the page, $2, 800 overage, initialed in Tyler's scrawl. He'd already started laying debts in my daughter's name. When I drove back to the farmhouse that night, I set the keys on the kitchen table beside the property tax bill, $9,412 due in July. The brass caught the moonlight through the window, cold and accusing. Emily's wedding flowers still sat in my truck bed, wilted and forgotten. Sleep wouldn't come. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't know, "We'll send a locksmith if we have to." I stepped out onto the porch. The night was thick, humid. Out in the north field, a hawk circled slow under the moon, as if it smelled something freshly dying. I leaned on the railing, hearing Linda's voice the way I always did when life tilted sideways. "Inventory first, Danny. Don't panic. Count what's yours." And that's when resolve finally replaced shame. That was the night I decided, every receipt, every bill, every key would become a weapon. My humiliation wasn't the end, it was the ledger I was about to balance. The wedding was over. The fight for my farm had begun. Humiliation is a funny poison. It doesn't kill you outright, it seeps into your bones, makes your chest feel hollow, and whispers that maybe you deserve it. The days after the wedding were a blur. Emily and Tyler packed up their wedding gifts and moved into his downtown loft in Des Moines by May 26. I stood in the driveway and watched the U-Haul roll out, my daughter waving from the passenger seat, her smile paper-thin. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like someone who'd been sold something and realized too late the warranty was fake. That night, when I climbed into my old Chevy, I found the wedding program shoved into the visor. Someone had scribbled in pen next to my name, "Consolidating Assets." I held it so long my thumbprint stained the paper. On May 27, around 7:15 in the evening, I saw headlights creep down my gravel lane. A white van parked by the gate. A man in a navy windbreaker got out, toolbox in hand. He said he was a locksmith, authorized by the family. His words, not mine. I asked to see paperwork. He shifted, muttered something about forgetting it, then drove off quick. Walt, my neighbor, texted me 5 minutes later, "Saw a van at your place. Everything all right?" That was when fear replaced humiliation. Because now it wasn't just a joke at a wedding, it was real. Someone was testing my locks. I walked through the farmhouse counting what I could lose. The 4-bedroom house where Linda took her last breath. The east field that paid for Emily's nursing school. The barn with its oil-stained floor, where the smell of hay and diesel still clung to my clothes. Every inch of it was my pension, my future, my last grip on a life built with calloused hands. I poured coffee I didn't need and stared at the green tractor fob, lying on the counter like a toy. It felt ridiculous, how a piece of plastic could carry so much weight. I thought about Tyler's smirk at the wedding, the way he said, "Families consolidating," like he was the CEO of my life. I picked up that crumpled $2,800 catering slip again and circled the total in red marker, just to remind myself this wasn't paranoia. It was proof. I called Emily. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. When she finally texted back, it was short, "We're settling in. Talk later." 3 words from my own daughter, and none of them told me she was safe. The silence of the house pressed in around me. You'd think silence would be peaceful, but at my kitchen table, silence was violent. Every creak of the rafters felt like a footstep. The landline rang once and quit, leaving only a dead hum. I sat there with my head in my hands, ashamed that a room full of strangers had watched me flinch, and worse, that I had almost given in. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of Linda. She was in the north field, standing by the corn rows, waving me over. But no matter how fast I walked, she stayed the same distance away, her lips moving, her voice carried off by the wind. By morning, I decided to stop running from my fear. If Tyler was going to come after my land on paper, then I'd fight back on paper. I gathered the deed, the tax notice, $9 for 12 due in July, and every last receipt from the kitchen drawer. I photographed each one with my old digital camera, the flash glaring on the glossy surfaces. I wrote one word across the top of a yellow legal pad, "Inventory." The shame still burned in me, but now it was being shaped into something solid. Shame can paralyze you. Or, if you're stubborn like me, it can become steel. And by June 3rd, I carried that steel in my pocket as I walked into a lawyer's office for the first time in my life. The law office smelled like lemon oil and printer toner. It was June 3rd, a Tuesday morning, and I sat across from attorney Sophia Rivera with a manila folder fat enough to make her raise an eyebrow. I slid the brass house key across her desk first, then the barn key, then the green tractor fob. "He wants these," I said. "But he's not getting them." Then I laid out the rest, the crumpled $2,800 catering slip, the $9,412 property tax bill due in July, and photographs of my deed, my receipts, and the text message thread about the locksmith. Sophia listened without interrupting, tapping her pen against a yellow pad. When I finished, she leaned forward. "He's not after the keys. He's after the title. Men like him always go through the paperwork first." Her words hit me like a hammer. I'd been bracing for locks to be changed in the night, or a flatbed trailer rolling up to haul away my tractor. But she was right, if Tyler wanted to own my land, he'd do it with a signature, not a crowbar. We drew up a revocable living trust that same day, the Hart Trust. I would remain trustee, with Emily listed as beneficiary only under clear conditions. We also drafted a notice of interest to be filed at the county recorder's office. Sophia explained it like this: "It's like nailing a sign to your title. Any lender who goes sniffing will see trouble and walk away." On June 6th, I drove into town and had the farmhouse rekeyed. The locksmith gave me a receipt, which I slipped into a cedar box I labeled in pencil, "Hart Trust." I set that box on the mantel where I could see it every night. Claire Nguyen, the vice president at the local community bank, added another layer. She set up fraud alerts so that any attempt to borrow against my parcel number would hit her desk first. I trusted Claire. Her family had been farming soybeans 2 counties over since before I was born. Walt, my neighbor, helped in his own way. He mounted a trail camera on the cottonwood tree near my lane, angled toward the gate. "Eyes don't lie," he told me, slipping the memory card into my hand. And then there was Brinley Shaw. A licensed PI with a reputation for digging through county records like a bloodhound. I paid her a $1,500 retainer to pull everything she could on Tyler, his business filings, any LLCs, debts, or liens he was hiding. That night, I walked the fence line of my property, whispering my plan like a prayer. Paper first. Sheriff second. Court third. The hawk circled overhead again, same slow orbit as if it could read my intentions. At dinner, I filled a yellow pad with the phrase, "No conveyance without my consent," writing it 50 times until my hand ached. I wanted it burned into muscle memory. By the time I slid into bed, I realized I wasn't panicking anymore. I was preparing. Revenge, as it turns out, doesn't start with anger, it starts with paperwork. And sure enough, the first ripple came faster than I expected. On June 18th, my phone rang. Claire from the bank. "Dan," she said, her voice tight, "someone just tried to open a $699,842 line of credit against your farm. Using a power of attorney with your signature." I sat up straighter, gripping the phone. It wasn't my signature. "I know," she said. And I froze it. "But you'll want to see this application yourself." That was when I knew Tyler wasn't just playing games anymore. He was escalating. And he was doing it in writing. The envelope from Claire landed on my kitchen table on June 19th. Inside was a copy of the loan application, $699,842 requested, using a power of attorney with my so-called signature. Only it wasn't mine. The handwriting was clumsy, rushed, my name spelled clean but flat, like someone traced it from memory. I underlined every false detail with a red pen. Income inflated, debts erased, and at the bottom, my farm listed as collateral. Whoever typed this thought they could rewrite my life with a keystroke. I called Sophia. She told me to bring everything. When I laid the documents across her conference table, she didn't even flinch. She just said, "Now we're in the game." That same week, Walt texted me a grainy photo from the trail cam. A man in sunglasses, crouched by my back door at dusk, testing the knob with a gloved hand. The date stamp was clear. I printed it and slid it into the cedar box marked Heart Trust. Meanwhile, I had a CD burned from the wedding DJ's soundboard, the exact moment Tyler toasted, "Give me the keys." His voice carried over the music, smug, undeniable. I labeled it in black marker, "Wedding Audio, May 24th. Another brick in the wall. Sophia drafted a no trespass letter and had it served to Tyler's new loft. The sheriff's deputy knocked at his door on June 22nd. I heard from Emily later that Tyler laughed it off, said, "Just old Dan playing with paperwork." He had no idea how much paper I was stacking against him. On June 25th, Brinley sent me her first report. 2 shell LLCs tied to Tyler. One called Grainbridge Capital, registered June 10th, barely 2 weeks after the wedding. The other, Brooks Development Group, had been bouncing checks for months. Both smelled like desperation. I drove to the county recorder's office in Winterset on June 28th. The clerk stamped the notice of interest and filed my trust documents. The sound of that rubber stamp hitting paper was better than church bells. My land was no longer easy prey, it had teeth now. At home, I practiced sliding a small digital recorder into my shirt pocket without looking. Click on, click off, smooth as a habit. I recorded myself reading the deed aloud, just to hear the certainty in my own voice. The green tractor fob, once always in my pocket, now sat in my desk drawer. I took a photo of it there, time-stamped and dated. If Tyler tried to claim I'd handed it over, I'd have proof otherwise. Revenge wasn't dramatic yet. It wasn't fireworks or shouting. It was tedious, small, almost boring, like stacking bricks one at a time until a wall was too high to climb. But each piece of evidence, each receipt and photo, was a weapon sharpening itself in silence. By the end of June, my cedar box was half full, catering slip, tax bill, trail cam still, DJ audio, forged POA, bank application, locksmith threat, no trespass letter. Every time I lifted the lid, it smelled faintly of cedar and ink, a box that would bury a man if opened in the right room. Tyler thought he was clever. Thought he could press me in public and then quietly snatch my land in private. But I was no longer the humiliated father at a wedding. I was a man building a case. And when July rolled around, Tyler made his boldest move yet. A courier showed up at my farmhouse with a typed 30-day vacate notice. No court stamp, no judge's order, just a piece of paper meant to scare me off my own land. Emily's voice shook over the phone that night. "Dad, he says it's standard. Just don't make trouble." That was when I knew. Tyler wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And my daughter was caught in his web. The courier's envelope sat on my kitchen table like a snake coiled in paper. Bold letters across the top, 30-day vacate notice. No judge's signature. No seal. Just typed words meant to scare me out of my own home. I called Emily that night, July 2nd. She answered on the third ring, her voice small. "Dad, he says it's standard. Just until everything is consolidated." "Emily," I said, reading the notice line by line into the phone, "does he love you, or does he love leverage?" Silence. Then I heard her sob. She didn't answer the question, because deep down she knew the truth. On July 7th, I walked outside and found orange chalk arrows scrawled across my gravel drive, pointing straight toward my fuel tanks. Someone was marking my land like a construction site. 3 days later, July 10th, Tyler didn't send a courier, he came himself. Pulled up with 2 men in a rented flatbed truck, idling at the edge of my barn. They stepped out, glancing at the equipment like scavengers circling fresh kill. Walt showed up first, his old Ford coughing up dust as he swung into my lane. Then Deputy Kincaid arrived, summoned by Walt before I'd even picked up the phone. I met them at the gate, no trespass letter in hand. Tyler grinned, all charm, as if this was a neighborly dispute. "This paper says you can't step foot here without my say-so," I told him, handing the deputy the letter. Kincaid read it slowly, nodded, and turned to Tyler. "You and your friends need to leave." They did, but not before Tyler leaned close and hissed, "This isn't over, old man. You'll wish you just handed me the keys." That night, Emily called again. Her voice cracked. "Dad. I'm scared." She forwarded screenshots from her joint bank app, Tyler's revolving debt stacked at $118,400. Red numbers flashing like sirens. "He told me not to show you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Emily, you take care of your heart. I'll take care of the land." By October, Brinley's PI report came through. She found that Tyler's LLC, Grainbridge Capital, was shuffling cash between accounts in sums just under reporting thresholds, $9,900, $9,850. $9,750. Always skimming under the radar, but consistent. "Classic structuring," she said. "He's desperate, trying to hide it." Meanwhile, Sophia floated an idea I hadn't considered, a conservation easement. A legal filing that would make my farm worthless to developers but still mine to work until my last breath. "It's a poison pill," she explained. "If he ever does get his hands on the deed, he won't be able to strip it for profit." It was drastic. But drastic was exactly where Tyler was pushing me. Then Emily called with an invitation that changed everything. "Dad, I want you at Thanksgiving. Tyler's insisting, says it's time we make peace." I almost laughed. Peace? After forged signatures, fake notices, and men at my barn doors? But my daughter was caught in this trap, and I wasn't about to leave her alone at the table. So I agreed. But not without my own plan. I baked a simple pumpkin pie and set it on the counter, but I also called Claire from the bank and Sophia from the law office. Dinner with new friends, I told them. Bring your paperwork appetites. On November 26th, the day before Thanksgiving, Brinley sent me her last breadcrumb, a notary log from a UPS store. It showed my name, but misspelled, Danielle Hart, signed on June 17th. The clerk remembered Tyler's assistant rushing the process. The surveillance still showed a stranger, not me. That was my final puzzle piece. Proof of fraud. So when I walked into that Thanksgiving dinner, I wasn't just a father with pie. I was a man with an envelope full of dynamite, ready to light it in front of the whole family. The morning before Thanksgiving, Brinley called me from the UPS store parking lot. Got it, she said, wind whipping through her phone. June 17th, notarization log. Name misspelled, Danielle Hart. Clerk remembers Tyler's runner. And we've got camera stills. Not you. I thanked her and slipped the packet into my cedar box, right on top of the forged loan application. The box was heavy now, not just with paper but with certainty. That afternoon, I drove into town to meet Sophia and Claire. We spread the exhibits across her conference table. The catering slip, $2,800 overage. The property tax bill, $9,412. The forged POA and the $699,842 loan attempt. Trail cam stills of a stranger at my back door. Wedding audio on CD, Tyler's voice demanding my keys. And now, the notarization log proving fraud. Sophia slid a clean tiara, temporary restraining order, into a manila envelope. You'll have this ready to file Friday morning. County attorney already has a heads up. But tomorrow is where we set the stage. Claire nodded. I'll be there. I want to see his face when this comes out. That night, I reread every page by lamplight, like a preacher rehearsing scripture. I stacked the papers into one thick envelope and labeled it in black marker, Thanksgiving evidence. Then I set it beside the pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. One sweet, one bitter. November 27th came cold and bright. I pulled up to Emily and Tyler's suburban house at noon. SUVs lined the street. Laughter spilled from the open garage where folding tables sagged with casseroles and pies. I carried mine inside, the envelope tucked under my arm like a hymnal. Tyler greeted me at the door, grinning wide, his arm clamped around Emily. Dad made it, he announced, loud enough for the cousins in the living room to hear. Good, time to talk family business. He guided me toward the dining table, where his so-called partners were already seated, men in sport coats, tapping at their phones. I recognized one from Brinley's report, a registered agent for Grainbridge. Dinner went through the motions. Grace, small talk, the clatter of forks. But I barely tasted a bite. My eyes stayed on that envelope by my plate, waiting for the moment. It came just as the turkey was carved. Tyler raised his glass again, déjà vu of the wedding toast. Let's thank my father-in-law for finally making peace with this transition. Dan, those keys are coming home with us tonight. The room hushed. Emily's hand trembled around her fork. I stood, slowly, envelope in hand. Funny thing about keys, Tyler. They only fit if the lock's real. And you? You've been jamming fakes into my doors. I opened the envelope and slid out the first page, the forged loan application. Gasps circled the table. Then the notarization log, with Danielle Hart scrawled in blue felt tip. Finally, I pressed play on a small recorder, Tyler's voice from the wedding, crystal clear, give me the keys. Sophia cleared her throat from the far end of the table. I'm Dan's attorney. Everything you're seeing has already been filed in preliminary form. Tomorrow morning, the TRO goes to the county judge. Fraud charges are next. Claire added, calm as stone, and the bank has flagged Grainbridge and Brooks Development for suspicious activity. Accounts are under review. Tyler's smirk cracked. His partners shifted uncomfortably, whispering. Emily stared at him, tears in her eyes. You lied to me. He tried to recover, laughing it off. Come on, this is just paperwork, Dan's overreacting. But Walt chose that moment to step forward from the doorway, holding the trail cam photo in his calloused hand. Paperwork don't break into back doors. The room erupted, cousins whispering, aunts shaking their heads, Emily bolting from the table. Tyler's voice climbed, high and desperate, but no one was listening anymore. I set the keys on the table, just for a moment, gleaming under the chandelier. You wanted these in front of the family, Tyler? Now you've got them. But what you don't have, and never will, is my farm. And with that, the balance shifted. The hunter was cornered, the liar exposed. The showdown wasn't over yet, but the mask had finally cracked. The silence after my words was thicker than gravy cooling on the turkey. The chandelier hummed, the clink of a fork dropped somewhere near the end of the table. Tyler stood there with his glass half raised, his grin gone stiff as plaster. Emily's face was pale. She stared at him like she was seeing her husband for the first time, not the groom from her wedding day, but the man who had just been unmasked. Tyler slammed his glass down, red wine splattering across the white tablecloth. This is a setup, he barked. Old Dan here, he's just bitter. He can't stand that the farm's going to finally make real money instead of rotting under his boots. Sophia didn't flinch. She held up the notarization log, the name, Danielle Hart, scrawled across it in shaky blue felt tip. Forgery is a felony, she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut the air. And banks don't like liars. Claire slid her phone across the table. On the screen glowed an email from her fraud unit, accounts frozen, Grainbridge Capital and Brooks Development Group. Your little empire just hit a wall, she said. Tyler's partners muttered curses under their breath. One shoved his chair back, muttering, I'm not going down with this. Another checked his phone and slipped out the side door. The room was fracturing, and Tyler knew it. Emily, don't listen to them, he snapped, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. They're twisting this. I'm doing this for us, for our future. But Emily shook her head, tears streaming now. Our future? You forged my father's signature. You tried to steal the only thing he has left of Mom. That's not a future. That's a scam. Walt laid the trail cam photo down on the table like the final nail in a coffin. Caught your boy here poking at Dan's back door. That ain't love, son, it's trespass. Tyler lunged for the papers, but I slapped my palm over them first. For the first time in weeks, I felt no shame, no humiliation, just the steady burn of justice. You made me the fool at my daughter's wedding, I said, my voice low but carrying through the room. But tonight? You're the fool in front of everyone else. Emily stood up, her chair screeching against the hardwood. We're done, Tyler. Her voice broke, but her back was straight. I'll be at Dad's until this is over. Tyler's face twisted, somewhere between rage and desperation. You think you can embarrass me? In front of my partners? In front of everyone? I leaned closer, meeting his eyes. Embarrassment is the least of your worries. Tomorrow morning, that TRO hits the judge's desk. You won't step foot on my land again without a deputy at your heels. The house was buzzing now, family whispering, phones recording, aunts pulling Emily into their arms. Tyler's empire was collapsing right there on the Thanksgiving table, not with guns or fists, but with receipts, recordings, and the truth laid bare. He tried one last bluff. I'll sue you, old man. I'll drag you through court for defamation. Sophia smiled, a predator's smile. Do that. Discovery will be a delight. Every forged document, every shady transfer, every partner you conned, they'll all be evidence. You won't just lose the farm you never had, you'll lose everything. By the time dessert was served, Tyler was gone. slipped out the back door, red-faced, his empire crumbling. Emily stayed behind, quiet, her hand clutching mine at the table like she used to when she was a child afraid of storms. When the house finally cleared, I drove her home with the pie untouched on the seat between us. "Dad," she whispered, "I thought I was marrying someone strong. Turns out he was just a thief." I squeezed her hand. Strength isn't about stealing what isn't yours. It's about protecting what is. That night, I locked the cedar box back on my mantel. The Thanksgiving showdown was finished, but the real consequences were just beginning. Tyler wasn't just humiliated, he was cornered. And men like him, when cornered, make mistakes that finish them. Friday morning, I filed the TRO at the county courthouse. By noon, Tyler's access to my land was legally barred. The judge's stamp hit the paper with the same weight as a gavel, and in that moment, I felt Linda's voice in my ear again, "Count what's yours." And now, what was mine was safe. For the first time in months, I drove the fence line without fear, the hawk circling overhead as though it approved. But Tyler? He wasn't done flailing yet. His fall was only just beginning. December 12, 2025. The courthouse in Winterset was dressed for Christmas, garlands over the doors, a wreath hanging lopsided above the clerk's window. But inside courtroom 3, it was all business. Tyler sat at the defense table, jaw tight, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. Emily sat behind me, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes red but steady. Sophia stood tall at our table, her binder fat with everything we'd stacked: wedding audio, forged notarization, bank filings, trail cam photos. When the judge entered, the room hushed. The case was titled Hart vs. Brooks. Just seeing my name on the plaintiff's side was a reminder, I wasn't defending anymore. I was attacking. Sophia laid it out clean. Exhibit A, the notarization log from June 17, my name misspelled as Danielle Hart, with surveillance stills showing a stranger signing. Exhibit B, the $699,842 loan application, red inked where my supposed signature sat at the bottom. Exhibit C, the trail cam photo of the intruder testing my back door. And finally, Exhibit D, the wedding audio, Tyler's voice booming through the speakers, "Dan, hand me the keys." The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Brooks, this is substantial evidence of attempted fraud." Tyler's lawyer tried to spin it. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding. My client was simply arranging family assets." The judge cut him off. "By forging signatures? By filing false loan applications? That's not family. That's fraud." His gavel came down like thunder. "The restraining order is upheld. Mr. Brooks, you are barred from contacting Mr. Hart, his property, or his financial accounts. This matter will also be referred to the county attorney for review." Tyler's face drained of color. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. The predator stripped of teeth. Outside the courtroom, Claire met us with fresh news from the bank. "Grainbridge Capital is finished," she said, her voice crisp. "Accounts frozen. Brooks Development flagged. IRS has already been alerted to the structuring. He won't be opening any more lines of credit, not here, not anywhere." Emily broke down right there in the hallway. She clung to me, sobbing into my jacket. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it." I stroked her hair like I had when she was a little girl. "It's not your fault. Con men don't trick because people are stupid, they trick because people trust." By Christmas, Tyler's empire had collapsed. His partners abandoned him, his account seized, his name stained in every bank within the state. Emily filed for separation. And me? I walked my fields in the frost, deeds still mine, tractor still humming, house still locked by keys that never left my hand. Justice isn't flashy. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it's a stamp on paper, a gavel on a desk, and the sound of your enemy's last excuse falling flat. I had my justice. But more than that, I had my land, my daughter, and my promise to Linda still intact. Winter came hard that year. Snow crusted the fields, the barn roof groaned under ice, and the house creaked like an old ship. But for the first time in months, I slept easy. The farm was still mine. I'd walk the fence line in the mornings, boots crunching on frost, and think about how close I came to losing everything. Not to fire or drought or hail, but to a smile with perfect teeth and a forged signature. I'd replay the wedding toast in my head, Tyler's voice booming through that microphone, hand over the keys. At the time, I felt stripped, humiliated, small. Now, I hear it differently. I hear desperation. I hear a man trying to stake his claim not with sweat or soil, but with spectacle. And I think about Linda. She'd been gone 5 years, but in those sleepless nights, her voice came back clearer than ever. Inventory first, Danny. Count what's yours. She was right. Counting wasn't just about property. It was about counting on myself. Counting on neighbors like Walt, on allies like Sophia and Claire, on the stubborn streak that runs in my blood. Emily moved back into the farmhouse in February, boxes stacked by the fireplace, her wedding photos already shoved into storage. One night, she asked me, "Dad, do you hate him?" I thought about it. Hate takes work. Tyler wasn't worth that much of me. No, I said. I don't hate him. I pity him. A man who thinks property is love, who sees people as leverage, that man's already bankrupt. I told her something else, too. Revenge isn't cruelty. It's boundaries. It's saying, you don't get to take from me again. And that's what I'd done. Not burned his life down, not dragged him through tabloids, not made him suffer beyond the weight of his own lies. Just a boundary, drawn sharp and permanent. The farm stood as it always had. The same brass keys in my pocket. The same green tractor fob on my desk. The same cedar box on the mantel, filled with papers that told the story of a man who refused to bow. Some nights I sit at the kitchen table, look at that box, and smile. Because those documents aren't just proof of Tyler's fraud, they're proof of my fight. And I think about the lesson in all of it: you didn't lose me, Tyler. You gave me away the moment you chose greed over family. That's the thing about land, about love, about legacy. They don't belong to the loudest man in the room. They belong to the one who holds steady when the room goes silent. And when I turn the key in my farmhouse door each night, I know, I held steady. I kept what was mine. By February, the dust had settled in public, but in private the ripples were still spreading. Tyler's name was plastered in the Des Moines Register under a small but damning headline: local developer investigated for fraudulent filings. It wasn't front-page news, but it was enough. His so-called partners turned on him, creditors lined up, and one by one, the doors he used to swagger through slammed shut. I didn't celebrate. Justice is quiet like that. It doesn't need champagne, it needs time. Emily filed for divorce with Sophia's guidance. The papers were served in March. Tyler never even contested them, he couldn't afford to. By spring, my daughter's last tie to him was a thin ring of pale skin on her finger where a wedding band used to sit. She stayed with me in the farmhouse while she got back on her feet. Boxes of her things crowded the upstairs hallway. Some nights I'd hear her crying softly behind her door, and it broke me. But healing is slower than breaking. I tried to give her small victories. We planted a new row of maples along the east fence in April. She chose the spot, said it would feel like a fresh start. We painted the barn doors red again, the way Linda liked them. Slowly, Emily's laugh came back, quieter than before, but real. As for me, I learned the weight of preparedness. Every document, every receipt, every camera photo mattered. I kept the cedar box on the mantel as a reminder. Not of Tyler, but of resolve. Because I know there'll always be another storm, whether it's drought, debt, or someone else's greed. But storms pass. And walls built right stand. The community never looked at me the same way again. At the diner in town, folks nodded when I walked in, quiet respect in their eyes. Walt told me over coffee one morning, "Dan, you didn't just keep your land. You reminded all of us, paper counts as much as plows these days." Tyler? Last I heard, he was living in a rental outside Omaha, working odd jobs, waiting on indictments. His empire gone, his reputation ash. I don't smile when I hear it. I just let it pass through me like wind across the fields. By summer, Emily was enrolled in a new nursing program closer to home. She kissed me on the cheek one evening and said, "Dad, you gave me back more than land. You gave me back a place to heal." I didn't answer right away. Just looked out at the fields, green and endless, the same ones Linda once walked through. Aftermath isn't about revenge, it's about rebuilding. And in that rebuilding, I found something stronger than anger, peace. By summer's end, the farm was steady again. The soybeans rose clean, the maples Emily planted along the east fence caught the breeze, and for the first time in a year, I felt the season move without fear. That's when the letter came. A thin envelope from the county attorney's office, stamped official. Inside, notice of charges filed against Tyler Brooks, attempted deed fraud, falsification of financial documents, and conspiracy to obtain property under false pretenses. Court date set for September. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once stared at that $9,412 tax bill and felt panic. Only now, I felt nothing but relief. Tyler's tricks weren't just over, they were recorded in the same courthouse he tried to cheat. Emily read the letter beside me. She exhaled, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "It's really over," she whispered. And then came the irony, the kind life saves for men who overreach. Tyler had once bragged about consolidating family assets. But when the county froze his accounts, it was my tax payment that cleared, my title that remained untarnished, and my trust, the heart trust, that passed review without a single red flag. The very paperwork he tried to weaponize became the shield that destroyed him. In September, he shuffled into court with a public defender at his side. I didn't even bother attending. I didn't need to see him fall. I'd already won where it mattered, in my home, in my fields, in the steady sound of keys jingling in my pocket. The farm wasn't just safe. It was stronger. The conservation easement Sophia filed meant no developer could ever strip it. Emily would inherit land, not leverage. That was the legacy Linda wanted, and that's the one I secured. Sometimes I sit on the porch at dusk, listening to the cicadas and watching the hawk circle the north field. I think about how close I came to caving that night at the wedding, how the weight of shame nearly made me hand over my life in front of 200 strangers. But I didn't. I chose to count what was mine, to defend it with patience instead of fists, with truth instead of noise. Tyler lost more than land or money. He lost his mask. He lost the one thing a con man needs more than cash, credibility. And once it's gone, it never comes back. As for me, I hold the same brass keys, worn smooth from decades of use. I turn them in the lock every night, the same lock I had rekeyed on June 6th, the receipt still tucked in the cedar box on my mantel. A box full of proof, a box full of survival. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: revenge doesn't mean cruelty. It means drawing a line so clear it can't be crossed again. And when people ask what happened to my son-in-law, I just smile and say, "You didn't lose me, Tyler. You gave me away the moment you mistook my land for leverage." That's the final irony. He thought he could take everything from me in front of my family. Instead, he lost everything in front of his own. And I'm still here, farm intact, daughter safe, keys in hand.